Is it time to ditch the two-child benefit cap? Labour rebels are said to be piling pressure on Keir Starmer to reverse the Conservative policy, which critics have labelled cruel. Introduced 7 years ago, it stops parents from claiming universal credit or child credit for their third child. But new figures show that 2 in 5 large families are now being affected by the limit. So, with a fresh light being shone on child poverty rates, is it time that this cap was scrapped? Or do you think that if someone can't afford to have more kids, then the government really shouldn't be picking up that bill? 027 862 2222 is the number that you need to give us a call and let us know your thoughts. Esther, what do you think of this policy? It is being blamed for a huge rise in child poverty. So is it about time that it went?
No, I don't think it should go. I think mainly the money that... I personally have reservations about giving financial incentives for people to have children in general. I think the money that is not spent on this should go into, improving child education, making childcare more readily available. It should go into improving services. But I also think there's something to be said about the fact that the rest of us, who are hardworking people, have to consider whether we can financially afford more than 2 children. Yes, the birth rate in this country is low, and yes, it's very difficult for many people to make the choice to have children. But I think a 2-child cap is reasonable, because going over that, you have to be able to fund it yourself. I'm sorry, the rest of us are not just so rich that we can just subsidize the lifestyles of people that really shouldn't have kids because they can't afford it. I'd like to draw parallels with France, because in France you have loads of migrants from Niger and Mali, and the average child rate for those countries are about 6 children per woman. So you have people coming from those countries having 6 children and being subsidized by the French state. Okay. And Macron, who's not right on many things, actually made the point that actually they should be considering whether they can have it instead of assuming that the state will just pick up the tab.
But we're talking about the situation right here in the UK. One of the big concerns of this government, the previous government and future governments is going to be the fact that we're not having enough children.
Yeah.
I mean, that's been pointed out as a massive problem awaiting us down the line. Who's going to be paying those tax revenues? Who's going to be looking after all of us when we get older? This actually disincentivizes people from having more than 2 kids.
It's not this. It's Michael, housing that does
What do you think?
I think this cap was a terrible policy to begin with for 2 reasons.
Brought in by George Osborne.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, because it's punishing children, essentially. If you're a third child, you're entitled to less money, right? The reason we pay this support to parents is so they can pay for the care for their children, their food, their shelter, etc., etc. So I think there's unfairness when it comes to the children. We can see how many children have been pushed into poverty because of this policy. And then I think because of broader social policy aims, I actually think we should be subsidising parents way more. Because I think one of the big reasons why we have a declining birth rate is because people think, oh, well, I could have kids. It's going to be way more expensive. For example, my sister has kids. Her life is just so much more expensive than mine. I get to go on more holidays and stuff. I think if we have a declining birth rate, we should be essentially compensating people to have kids to a much higher degree than we currently do. So I would say scrap
you have to question what's the best way to do that.
Scrap the 2-child limit, and we should be subsidising parents more than we currently do.
I agree with you. We have to encourage people to have more kids. But the question is, what's the best way to do that? The reason why people can't afford kids is because they can't afford housing, right?
Childcare. We have some of the most expensive childcare.
Exactly, and not readily available. These are the kinds of things you can incentivize, grandparents, for instance, to help out with childcare or subsidise people to move closer to home.
So it seems to me that you're not averse to the government helping people having more kids, but you're averse to this.
No, I don't believe in I don't think the solution is to hand out more money to people that really shouldn't be having more kids. I think the solution is to make it easier for people who don't have kids, to have kids. That's the first thing. And secondly, to improve services for children. Because you're right, we shouldn't punish the children, but I don't think the solution is to hand the parents money. We should be improving the services that the children directly benefit from. What if we give someone a 3rd child benefit or a 4th child benefit and they spend it on themselves? We don't know that. We know that if we improve child services, that's actually going to benefit the child directly.
Okay,
if you have to make the choice whether you can have children because of your finances, that should be on you and not the state. Let's
hear what people are having to say at home. Dave in Lancaster. Dave, good afternoon. Welcome to the show. What do you think, Dave? 2-child cap. Should it go or should it stay?
No, it should absolutely stay.
Why?
Well, the world is overpopulated by some 3 billion people.
It's not, Dave. It's not, Dave. One of the biggest problems facing us at the moment is we're not having enough children.
No, you're only not having enough children because you're thinking about the economy. That's the reason you're thinking about children. No other reason.
Yeah.
The children, you just want more people to spend more money to keep more people rich. That's all you're looking for.
I think people are concerned that there's not going to be enough people doing jobs to pay taxes in order to pay the pensions that the people, all of us here living longer, will need to survive on.
Yes, I understand what you're saying. So now answer the question. Elon Musk has already said AE will take over this world and take a vast majority of the jobs going forward. You want to produce more children. Mm-hmm. How are you going to look after them? What are they going to do when there's no jobs available for them?
I'm assuming you mean AI, the artificial intelligence.
Sorry, did I say AE?
Yes. But
it's just that my wife's in hospital. I've been to the...
well, I hope she's doing well. Well, Michael, what do you make of that? I mean, we've had this discussion before when we had the sort of... the engineering revolution, where people said, oh, now that you're going to have tractors in the fields, what are all the farmers going to do? Well, guess what? People retrained to repair the tractors. Are we going to have the same thing happen with AI?
I would imagine so, and especially so when people talk about the fact that we need more children, it's not because it's necessarily good to have more people on the planet. I think we're sort of neutral in terms of the absolute number of people. It's about the ratio of working age people to older people. Yeah. And I think we're going to be in a situation, well, we're kind of already getting there actually, where you've got too many old people for the working age population to support. Obviously, that's a good thing. It's great that people are living longer. The thing you don't want to do is say, OK, let's have less old people then. What you want to do is say, let's have more working age people, which means we probably do need to be encouraging people to have more kids so that people to work in the care homes, to work in the hospitals and to pay the taxes to fund those things.
If you don't have more children, you have to import them. So over 93% of immigration, of natural population increase over the last 3 years has been because of immigration. The nature of our demography, which should be like an upside down triangle, has now become more of a column. And now it's going to become a lot more top heavy with fewer working age people supporting a growing population of older people that are not living longer, well, technically living to their natural age limits, but not necessarily living healthier. So they're actually not only living longer, but also more expensive.
Let me give you some numbers which really stand out when you look at the two-child benefit system. The cost of removing it cost the government around £3.4 billion. A lot of money, but not a huge amount of money, considering the trillions the government has in its disposal. 4.3 million children, that's 30% of all children, are living in poverty right here, right now, in the UK in 2024. 69% of those are in working households. These are not households where people are surviving on just benefits. These are where one or both parents are working, and these families are in poverty. I don't understand why, as Michael said, why we're punishing those children by refusing to scrap that two cap.
It's not punishing children by refusing to hand their parents more money if the money is being reinvested to improve services that directly benefit those children. And can I just point out, yes, you have 4 million children in relative poverty in this country, but you also have to look at what kinds of children are most likely to grow up in childhood poverty. They're mostly children, the vast majority from single-parent households. It would be more sensible to target that issue of why we have such a problem with single-parent, primarily single-mother-led households, and actually try and improve family-oriented policies where people can grow up with both their mother and their father, which would also improve their economic outlook in life. That's the solution.
All right, let's take a pause there because Amanda's got in touch. Amanda has got in touch from Lancashire. Amanda, good afternoon. Amanda, what are your thoughts?
I do actually think they should scrap it.
Yeah.
Or at least increase it to add more children.
Right.
Unless you are in a really good job, or both are in a really good job, after your first child, I personally think you can never really afford to have another child, but you learn to manage. Mm-hmm. I got caught pregnant and unfortunately lost that child, and we were shocked. But we were then prepared. We didn't have extra money, but we had a second child, and things had to change. We cut our coat according to cloth, but if I'd got pregnant and had another child, we would have still managed. But the family allowances, they called it, child benefit, it isn't mega money to a family, but it can make a massive difference to that one child that you have that third amount goes to.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
Amanda, what were your biggest outgoings when it came to the cost for children? Because we're talking about how to address the issue. Everybody acknowledges there is an issue. Esther's saying that the money should be going more to things that directly benefit the kids rather than handing the parents a chunk of money. What are the biggest issues that you had to face?
I think it is generally, I suppose, clothing, out of school activities, things like that. There isn't always a lot of out of school activities in the area that you may live in. But I think what we did to make sure that when we did get that money, it actually went on the children.
Right.
It went towards something that would benefit the children. And I think that's what is important, in a sense that if people get it, it is aimed towards the children and not necessarily pushed towards maybe, I suppose people would say a mortgage benefits children, but we made sure that they had clothes, they had good food.
Yeah. Amanda, thank you. Thank you for that. Really insightful. Let's speak to Anne, who's got in touch from Edinburgh. Anne, good afternoon. What are your thoughts on this, Anne? Anne, are you with us? There you are. Go on, Anne.
I was an only child of the 50s, and my parents didn't get any allowance for me.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you want more than 2 children, I think you should be able to make your own way to cover all their expenses.
Michael, I mean, it comes up a lot, doesn't it? If you want more than 2 children, then, yeah, you should be able to afford them.
Well, I suppose my concern there is that then lots of people will just decide not to have kids, because I suppose
we can have 2.
You can have 2 with support.
But a big change since the 1950s, when you're talking about, is it used to be the case that it was a given that you'd have kids. And I suppose you were probably fairly rare of that generation to be an only child, whereas now it's very much a choice whether to have kids. And lots of people are saying, well, it's so expensive to have kids, I'm not going to bother. So I would say that we as a society should be actively subsidising
there are huge gradations between not having children at all and having 3 children, because it only affects you if you have over 2 children, so 3+ children. There are huge gradations. The vast majority of people choose to have between 1 to 2 children. And I think the previous caller, just to contextualise the point that she made, yes. Yeah. She talked about the fact that, the government, the austerity government of George Osborne and David Cameron, that introduced this 2-child cap only saved about 3 billion. Keir Starmer is introducing a VAT on private school fees to claw back potentially just 1.5 billion pounds maximum, right? That money that was saved from this 2-child cap could directly go into the school system to actually give, extracurricular activities to the children that she was saying she had to cover by herself, right? These are the kinds of things that I'm talking about. I understand her point, but at the end of the day, if you're choosing to have over 2 children, I'm sorry, that's something that you shouldn't expect to be subsidized by the government. It's a difficult choice we all have to make, but we have to make sacrifices somewhere, and the ultimate beneficiary should be the child.
OK, let's take another call. Thank you, Anne. Tina's got in touch from Kent. Tina, good afternoon. What are your thoughts?
Hi. I think I agree with a lot of what, is it Esther?
Esther, yes.
Is saying. Yeah, I mean, I don't understand why people are relying on the state to subsidise them and to bring up their children. Where's that all come from? There's a complete lack of responsibility these days for people taking any responsibility for their own lives and their own
But then, Tina, we've touched on, and I think Esther and Michael agreed, we have some of the most expensive childcare in the country, cost of living crisis. If you don't get any help from the state for 1 or 2 or possibly even more children, are we going to end up in a state where only the wealthy can afford to have kids? Is that the kind of state you'd want to be in?
No, and I don't think that's true at all. The child benefit amount is not going to actually help you to bring up a child. Let's be realistic here, yeah? It's very minimal. It's not going to be anywhere near what you need to bring up a child. Childcare costs in this country are extortionate, and something should be done about that for sure. But we're talking about people here having 4, 5, 6 kids. Your average person doesn't do that. Your average person chooses to have children that they can only afford.
Hang on, Tina, Michael, you wanted to jump in on that. Go on.
I think sort of saying this is about people having 4, 5, 6 kids. I mean, the limit is the 2-child limit, right? So presumably most people this is going to affect are people who have 3 children. So I suppose you might say, OK, well, let's have a 4-child limit. But why bring up people who are having 4, 5, 6 kids when actually what we're talking about is getting no benefits for the 3rd child?
I don't really understand that point. The point is that you should be only having children if you can afford them, and you shouldn't be relying on the state and money from taxpayers to actually subsidise you and bring up your children. I'm saying all of these things as a single mum who has brought up my daughter alone for the last 15 years, and I actually take quite a bit of offence to what Esther was saying earlier about kids should be brought up in 2-parent households. My daughter's doing very well, thank you very much. I've brought her up very well. If anything, I'm actually quite annoyed about the fact that I think it's completely unfair that the government, the previous government, only allow me to earn £50,000 in my household because I'm a single person, and yet 2-parent households can earn £100,000 before they start to lose any of their, what is it that they've removed?
Tina, you're right in putting that, and I'm a product of a single mother who raised me up on her own, so I can attest to that. But let me ask you this one question just before we move on. We've got 4.3 million children living in poverty in the UK in 2024. That's 30%. That's 3 in 10 of all children in the UK. Are you happy with that?
I think it's completely outrageous that we even have child poverty in the UK. Right. You look at the amount of wastage of money going on with the government, with everywhere. It's outrageous. But the thing is, again, it's the parents' responsibility. It's the parents' responsibility that the children are living in poverty. If you look at some of these households, they've got too many kids. They've got parents who've got all the latest Sky, the latest
But then,
trainers,
Tina, if everybody stops having kids...
Let me just finish. You've got parents who've got literally everything. They smoke, they drink, they've got pets, they've got money for absolutely everything. Sure. But their children are living in poverty and they're using...
Well, that was the point I was making. I mean, I'm happy that you've raised a well-adjusted young lady, and this is no particular offence to single mothers. But the point that I was making was, if we want to reduce childhood poverty, one of the ways to do that is to make sure that children grow up in 2-parent homes, because you have 2 incomes to actually support the children, so that it lowers the likelihood of them going up in childhood poverty. The point here is that the government should be promoting family-friendly policies that actually provide children with that support, because it's not just about the financial benefit to them of not growing up in childhood poverty. It's also the emotional benefit. Children that grow up in 2-parent homes are much less likely to commit crimes. There are a whole range of issues.
I just think it's not the case that if you get rid of child benefit, less people are going to get divorced.
No one is saying get rid of child benefit. We're saying you have to do 2 things. You have to encourage family-friendly policies that encourage people to grow up in 2-parent homes, and you also have to engineer policies that directly benefit the child and not handing parents money.
For their 3rd child, do you think they should
There's no
get an
such thing as
abortion
being accidentally pregnant of a 3rd child. If you have sex, you know that you can get pregnant. It's a decision.
So you think maybe people should just stop?
No, people should take responsibility for their own sexual lives.
I'm gonna bring it to a close there. Tina, thank you. Really strong contribution. Thank you for that. We'll speak again. Thank you for your calls on this.